Cutting threads is kind of fun, and it's also kind of tedious if you're not careful. You've got to take your time. First thing I'm going to always do is take my file down the tool rest because it has to be straight, clean, and smooth. If it's not, you will have no success in cutting threads. So one of the things you can do in threads, one of the kinds of threads we can cut, there's two ways we can do it actually. We can turn it with the female threads on the inside of the lid and the male threads on the outside like this. Or we can do it the other way. I'll tell you, doing it this way, with these threads, female inside, is much easier to do. And I'm going to suggest for our first projects, and for maybe several after that, cutting them this way. So we're going to do female inside the box, and we're going to do male on the lid, which will come as a separate piece. We'll show you all that. Before we cut any of the threads, I put a relief behind each of the threads, purposes of which is when my chaser comes in here, I need to have a place to stop so I don't run into this wall and create what we call a drunken thread, which is, as you can imagine, not good. Okay, so before we get to any of this, we've got to practice a little bit. One of the easiest things to practice with is to get a piece of Schedule 40 PVC pipe, cut it into a couple small pieces, and turn our threads inside and outside here. It's going to cut just like the acrylic will. It's going to feel the same. The only difference is, we start here, both of these are the same diameter. They're not going to go together. So I'm going to have to take a little mass off the outside here. I'm going to have to take a little mass off the inside here before I begin to start cutting the threads. How much? I'm going to suggest for our projects with a 16 TPI thread cutter that we take off about half the thickness inside and half the thickness outside. Let me show you what I mean with a little paper example. So here's an example of a typical thread, cut out of paper anyway. But when we cut threads, they sort of look like this. Well, sort of. So if I try to measure the inside diameter, I'm going to be measuring between these 2 points. And that's not accurate because the next piece has to be small enough that it'll fit down inside of there. So when we measure these things with our 16 TPI cutters, I'm suggesting to allow about 1/8 of an inch, and then we'll turn the rest of the stock away down to the dimensions that fit perfectly. We don't want these a tight fit. We want them to be loose and easy to adjust. But remember that these overlap. One has to go inside the other. Okay, let's get back to practice. I want to show you how to do some practicing. Let's practice our thread cutting. And the easiest thing to do is to go to the hardware store and buy some of this PVC pipe. This is Schedule 40. It's got enough wall thickness that we can cut the threads. If we mess it up, we can turn it around, do the other end. Now, so these two are not going to fit together because they're the same diameter, so I need to take a little mass off of the outside here and a little mass off the inside on this one. So I've already done the inside, as you can see here. You have to be sure that when you take that mass off that it's done straight. So a straight edge laid inside will let you know whether this is coming in at an angle or straight. It's got to be straight or you won't be able to thread on very far. So let's do that. I've got one done. Let me do the one that'll mate to that. We want to end up with something that looks sort of like that. Okay, small piece of PVC into the chuck. 1 inch, 2 inch long piece is plenty. If you cut them square with a good saw, that means that this will come into the chuck very nice, and I can tighten it pretty well. That looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to cut this. First of all, I want to do is I want to true up this edge. I'm going to radius it over a little bit, and the reason I'm going to do that is my next step of cutting is going to require me to have a rounded corner here. Remember, I filed that tool rest, so it should run smoothly. And I need to take a little mass off the outside of this one. I'm going to first of all square up the outside edge. Now look what I'm doing with the tool. That was not what I wanted at all. I'm running about 400 RPM, and that's much better. Now, if I come in here with this tool in a normal wood cutting mode, it's not what I want to do. I want to scrape. So I'm going to place that tool at this angle and literally scrape across that surface. Now, I know you can cut this at high speed. You can cut it at low speed. I prefer you practice a little lower speed. Try different speeds, which works for you. You see how nicely that cuts. And that's scraping. And almost everything we're going to be doing is going to be scraping and giving us marks like that. So let's take some off the outside. I'm going to break these two corners at the same time. Little scrape here. Just that's all. Now the other direction. Now since I'm going to cut the threads on the outside here, I'm going to want a rounded corner. That may be in the camera a little bit, but that's, you can see what the result is. I'm using just the edge and I'm scraping. Do not open that tool up and try to cut like wood. It won't work. It just won't work. So let me figure how far I'm going to go. About there. This will give you a feel for how it feels. I'm not hearing any sound other than a little hissing sound, which is the sound of the plastic being cut. If I start hearing musical tones, that's chatter. And we don't want that. And once you've done this for a few minutes, you'll know how it feels. And you'll feel much more comfortable working with your acrylic or PVC pipe in this case. Now I'm looking over the back edge because I want to be sure that I'm doing this straight. We're going to get a lot of that. It's looking pretty straight. That's what I want. Take just a little bit more off. Okay. Next thing I need to do is to create a little thread relief here in the back. Little relief groove. and make sure that I got this edge rounded. That'll allow me to start the cut here and bring it around to the side. So that's there. You can see the threads are starting. Then we're going to square the tool rest up just a little bit more, because most of my work now is on the side. Make a note of your speed. So if you shut the lathe off and turn it back on, your rhythm will be the same. Now you can see the start of the threads. They're coming along. Now the goal is to get them down to the diameter that'll fit the other piece of PVC. Let's take a look. So there's a nice clean thread, but I don't know if it's going to fit my other piece. So I'll have to find it and try it. I'm going to reach over here and get the other piece and see if it will fit. I was lucky. That doesn't always happen. So what I've done is turn an inside thread here, an outside thread there, and what we need to now do is to turn the piece around and do it over again several times. Okay, so you understand, cut PVC, get the diameters so they will slide one side or the other. Practice cutting your threads with a rounded corner here. And then when we go to doing a box, like this one right here, here's one I've turned, I've hollowed, and there's a nice square straight edge right there, which is what we're going to do our threads on. The reason for this shape on a box is to allow me to cut the interior thread without the cutter ever running into something that would obstruct its free cutting of the threads. So let me just put this into the chuck. Now I turned this piece before we got here. I'll be sure to get it nice and straight. That's worse. Good. So now we're going to turn acrylic, and I've radiused the edge here, and the depth of the straight portion there is about that much. So now I'm going to cut an internal thread on the box, and later on we'll match a lid to it. So here, same cutter, but now this is the other end of the cutter. And I want to be sure that I am at slightly above the center line. That looks pretty good. I'm not going to change the speed on the lathe because I've kind of got my rhythm going. As you can see, I can go in as far as I want to because it'll clear inside. Once the thread is started, you just keep the same rhythm. Now let's see how we're doing. Get in real close here, you can see that thread is almost to the depth we want. It's clean. There's no drunken threads, which means I ran the tool cross-grained somehow. Looks pretty good. I'm going to cut it just a little deeper. I'm pulling the tool towards me, but I don't have to push it in here. The thread chaser will be drawn along by the threads itself. I just have to let it run. Now, for me to cut a lid to fit that, remember my drawing. Remember this portion. I have to measure this hole and come a little bit larger than that for my lid that I'm going to make. And I'm going to suggest making it about 1/8 of an inch larger in diameter than this because it's a 16 TPI thread cutter. My experience has told me that that's going to be a little too large, and by continuing to do this activity, I'll take it down until it fits. We want to be sure that this is running straight. If it's like this, it'll catch for maybe one thread and then bottom out. Has to be straight and square. So in making projects, internal thread, better. External thread on the lid. Why? Because when I have this in the chuck like this, I can very easily see what I'm working on right into the threader. So if this was in the chuck, I can see what I'm doing. It's not hidden in here. Practice, practice, practice. The best thing to do is to get PVC and do several different cuts on it until you're thorough and happy with it, and then tackle the project. Okay, we just finished cutting the threads in here. Now, what size does the thread on the stopper need to be to fit? Remember how I showed you how these overlap and need to come down into here? You need to account for that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my calipers. I'm going to measure the diameter of this hole. It's 0.755, 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to add another 8 to that, and I'm going to turn a diameter here that's going to be 1/8 larger than 3/4, 7/8, and it'll be mounted here, and that will give me enough material to be able to cut a thread that'll fit here just fine like that. Practice, practice, practice.